So, what do you think we could use our school for if we incorporated more sign language?
Yeah, I love sign language just because I think it gives you an opportunity, obviously, to communicate with individuals who might normally feel a little disenfranchised if they're not included in that way. And I just think it also, from a ministry perspective, gets people prepared to share the gospel in unique ways. And I love like going to an event, especially a Christian event like a faith conference, and then seeing somebody signing in the front and just knowing that Jesus' message is for everybody.
Yeah. So, out of your knowledge of the students here, how many do you think would be open to learning ASL?
Yeah, good question. I actually think people would be pretty receptive. I know it's challenging, and I know that ASL takes a lot of practice. I think people would be receptive because it's something that's not offered everywhere. And sometimes it's just nice to have a different sort of a class. I also like the physical aspect of it, that you're actually signing and not just working with probably, rules of grammar and so on, even though that's a part of it as well.
Yeah. So, do you think this could have a positive effect on teachers here? Or would it have a more negative effect because they'd have to learn another language?
Oh, good question. So you're saying like if the whole school was all in for ASL,
and that this is a big what if question of that.
Oh, that's a good question. Time is always the issue, or time management, or finding time to learn something like ASL. That'd be pretty radical to say, hey, we're gonna switch and everybody needs to learn this language.
Yeah.
I think teachers would be very receptive to it happening, and probably less receptive, not in a cruel way, but less receptive if they knew that it meant they needed to spend the years that it took to learn ASL, unless it was kind of we're all going to learn, X number of, X percentage of ASL, or X number of signs or something like that.
There are other ways too. Besides, it is possible to teach a full class without 2 deaf students without knowing ASL, but it's a harder thing to do.
Oh, yeah. That
came up in my research.
Oh, really?
Certain places, yeah.
Interesting.
So a lot of text, speech to text things are helpful in that situation. Is an interesting acoustics of the room.
Oh.
Due to advancements in technology, like cochlear implants and hearing aids now, like my right ear, mildly severe deafness. Now it's up to 80%, 90% hearing most days.
Yeah, I see those kind of things. I think you're right. If a teacher wore just an amplifying system, so that things could be picked up clearly, and then maybe with a closed captioning type of thing, I think that would be amazing. I think teachers would be receptive to that if it meant something that wasn't fully learning ASL that they could do.
Give me a sec. So what would you think, how do you think sports would be affected?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that would just be a value-added piece in terms of, and I don't even know what it would look like. You've obviously thought about this a lot more than I have, but I just think from a coaching perspective or camaraderie, I think in some ways people have to be more intentional about what they're saying if they're signing, but also some of the other methods that you mentioned. I think there are ways to be super inclusive in terms of making sure the message is being delivered and people are receiving it. That'd be an amazing thing to pursue. What would it take to be inclusive and welcoming and have everyone receive the same message in a sport? Yeah,
that also came up in my research of, I looked up how it's been used in sports, and it's been used a lot actually.
Really?
It's how the hand signs for strikes and outs and stuff
Oh, yeah.
were invented in baseball. The huddle was invented by a deaf school, so they could all sign to each other without being overseen by the other team.
Interesting.
And we use a lot of things that deaf people came up with in sports today without actually the remembering of where it all came from.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned like a catcher and pitcher in the signs, I saw, or I've heard recently about somebody even painting their fingernails as a catcher so the pitcher could more clearly see the signs that they were giving based on uniform color.
Yeah.
So, I hadn't heard that about the huddle before.
That is also an interesting fact that you brought up. That's neat.
Thanks.
So, another big thing with ASL stuff is there'd be this thing of interpreters. Do you think that there is places for like interpreters in the school, or maybe even ASL class?
Yeah.
Perhaps Sunday.
Yeah, we've looked at ASL class before. Probably these aren't insurmountable obstacles, but it's hard to find somebody who has that full background, especially with certification. I do think it would not be a problem with filling that class if we found the right instructor for it. Colleges are becoming very much more receptive, which I'm grateful for, in terms of accepting ASL classes as like a foreign language requirement, which I think is just a huge step. In terms of maybe being used more broadly in the school, like, that might require some funding if you were to have somebody who was like signing today's chapel message, for instance. But again, that's just a huge ministry opportunity, and that would be really neat. Sometimes this might be too specific, but if a student specifically needed those resources, at this point we would probably have to say that they weren't available, or we would have to say that. But if a family were to come in early on and say, we're going to help provide that, we'd be very receptive to that.
Yeah. So, last question that's very off topic, that I'm just going to be doing this for all my things, is, are tunics allowed in the men's dress code?
That is that's a really good question. You know what, it doesn't specifically address it, so if you don't mind, I'm gonna go based on what's there. Because it talks about things being distracting. For right now, it probably would be considered distracting unless, the school had a ministry emphasis that said, hey, if we can have some people from a culture or background who are wearing tunics and there's a ministry opportunity, I don't know that we'd ever just open it up to, hey, if you think a tunic is more comfortable, kind of a thing. But yeah, good question.
All right.
What's the background of that question?
Nothing. It was just a random question. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.